The FPS genre is about to get absolutely stacked. From massive AAA shooters to fast-paced tactical experiences, these upcoming first-person games are pushing graphics, gameplay, destruction, realism, and pure chaos to another level. In this video, we're taking a look at 14 upcoming FPS games that are about to change everything, including brand new shooters with insane visuals, ambitious mechanics, intense gunplay, and worlds that look way too good to be real.
Or just living inside someone else's dream. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Alright, so Cyberpunk is great, right? But let's be honest, we've kind of seen the same neon-drenched Blade Runner-inspired sandbox a dozen times over. Enter Neo Berlin 2087. This is an upcoming action RPG from Elysium Game Studio, and honestly, the moment you look at it, you get this massive, weirdly nostalgic vibe. It feels like someone threw Cyberpunk 2077, Deus Ex, and a gritty German detective thriller into a blender. Now, the coolest hook here is how it plays with perspective. The game lets you seamlessly transition between third-person exploration, where you get to look at your sleek, futuristic trench coat flowing in the wind, and tight, tactical first-person shooting when the bullets start flying. You play as a detective named Nolan who is basically trying to solve a massive conspiracy inside a highly stratified society where the rich live high above the clouds and the poor are literally rotting in the dark below. But it's not just a shooter, they are leaning heavily into investigative mechanics. You have to use mind-reading tech scan environments for clues and piece together the narrative yourself. The graphics are aiming for that ultra-realistic Unreal Engine 5 sheen that makes every rain puddle reflect 1,000 neon signs. The big question mark here? Scale and Polish Elysium is an indie studio tackling a massive AAA-sized vision. We've seen beautiful trailers at Gamescom, but can they actually pull off the RPG depth and smooth combat transitions without the jank?
Port Desire. A city that don't belong to anyone, but everyone.
Alright, let's talk about a game that completely caught everyone off guard when it dropped its announcement trailer at the Game Awards. It's called No Law, and it is being developed by Neon Giant, the absolute wizards who gave us the gorgeous, hyper-detailed twin-stick shooter The Ascent. But this time, they are ditching the camera angle and going full first-person, open-world shooter RPG. The setup here is incredibly grounded despite the sci-fi setting. You're Gray Harker, a war-weary ex-military veteran who is completely done with fighting. All he wants to do is live a quiet life in a coastal cyber-noir city called Port Desire, taking care of his houseplants seriously. But because it's a video game, trouble comes knocking, his piece is violently shattered, and now he's pulling his custom hardware out of retirement to settle some serious debts. What makes No Law so exciting is Neon Giant's track record for environmental storytelling. They know how to build a world that feels dirty, lived in, and packed with micro details. Port Desire looks gorgeous, blending high-tech dystopia with a maritime seaside aesthetic. The gameplay is promising heavy Black Ops tactical shooting, deep custom iron upgrades for your weapons, and an immersive open world where you have to rely on your military instincts to survive. Kraftan is publishing this, meaning the budget is there to back up Neon Giant's incredible art direction. It's brutal, it's stylistic, and honestly, playing as an angry, plant-loving, retired super soldier is exactly the kind of unhinged energy we need more of in gaming. Now, we've seen a lot of games try to capture realism, but what Unrecord is doing with Unreal Engine 5 is borderline black magic. The way the camera tilts, the washed out lighting, the fisheye lens effect, and especially the way your hands move independently of your view, it doesn't just look like a game, it feels like you're watching real footage on a news broadcast. In fact, it looked so real when it was first revealed that the developers literally had to post a video of themselves playing it inside the Unreal editor just to prove they weren't faking it. But beneath that jaw-dropping visual layer, how does it actually play? The developers are aiming for a narrative-driven tactical thriller. You aren't just running and gunning, you're playing as a tactical police officer solving a complex criminal case. That means heavy focus on positioning, split-second shoot or don't shoot decision making, and deep dialogue choices that happen right in the middle of a raid. The biggest challenge for Unrecord is going to be translating that mind-boggling visual fidelity into a game that actually feels satisfying to control over a 10-hour campaign. Motion sickness is definitely a concern with that heavy camera bob, but if they pull off the optimization and deliver a tight, immersive tactical sandbox, this could easily redefine first-person immersion for years to come.
What is justice?
Next up is Defect, and if you're tired of the same old corporate-friendly shooters, you're gonna want to pay attention here. This is the debut title from a new independent studio called Empty Vessel. And while the studio name might be new, the talent behind it is massive. We are talking about industry veterans who previously worked on heavy hitters like Doom, Call of Duty, and The Last of Us. Defect drops you headfirst into the last human city on Earth, a hyper-stylized cyberpunk dystopia completely ruled by an authoritarian AI known simply as the System. This isn't your friendly, cozy sci-fi, it's dirty, brutal, and backed by an absolute banger of an electronic soundtrack. Gameplay-wise, they are describing it as an immersive, squad-based objective shooter. The main hook, a chaotic multi-team setup, where 4 separate squads of 4 face off against each other and the city's terrifying AI law enforcement. It features close quarters firefights, futuristic weapons, and dynamic multi-objective finales where the battlefield changes on the fly. What makes Defect look so promising is that pedigree of raw gunplay feel. When you have developers from Doom working on a shooter, you know the weapon feedback and movement are going to be top tier. Plus, they're building it from the ground up on Unreal Engine 5 with native level editors and LAN support. If you miss old school tactical shooters with high-end modern polish, Defect needs to be on your radar.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Say hi back. Of course they know.
If there is one name that makes single-player shooter fans instantly stand up and pay attention, it's Ken Levine. The mastermind behind BioShock and BioShock Infinite is finally back with Ghost Story Games, and their debut project Judas looks absolutely unhinged in the best way possible. Let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, visually, it looks exactly like BioShock in space. You are on board the Mayflower, a massive retro-futuristic city ship carrying the last remnants of humanity. And just like Rapture or Columbia, everything has gone completely to hell. You have a weapon in one hand and crazy elemental techno powers in the other. But don't let the familiar coat of paint fool you. The real magic of Judas is what Levine is calling narrative Legos. Basically, the game is built to react entirely to your choices on a structural level. There are 3 main factions running the ship, and as you play, you have to choose who to ally with and who to betray. If you help one faction, the other 2 get pissed off and actively rewrite the game world to screw you over. It's trying to solve the oldest problem in gaming. How do you make a deeply cinematic story that actually changes based on player freedom? Take-Two Interactive is backing this heavily, and Levine recently confirmed it is a pure, old-school single-player experience, no live service, no battle passes, just a complete story. It suffered some delays pushing it past its original target, but honestly, let them cook. Alright, let's pivot to something entirely different, but equally stylistic. Imagine taking the dystopian high-tech corporate themes of cyberpunk, stripping away the crowded city streets and dropping the entire aesthetic straight into a desolate post-apocalyptic spaghetti western. That is the exact vibe of ExeKiller, a first-person cyber-western action-adventure being developed by Paradark Studio. You play as Denzel Phoenix, an ExeKiller, which is an incredibly badass title for a licensed bounty hunter working for the omnipresent Helion Corporation. Your main gig? Tracking down fugitives in a ruined world to rip out their souls, which are digital brain implants the Megacorp use to monitor and control what's left of the human population. But what makes ExeKiller stand out isn't just its unique 1970s retro-futuristic art style. It's the sheer amount of player freedom they are promising. This is a deeply narrative, choice-driven game. When you track down a target, you aren't just forced to pull the trigger. You can collect the bounty, let them go, extort them, or completely double-cross your corporate overlords. Your choices actively branch the story and alter how the world treats you. With snappy, heavy gunplay, a character progression system that lets you spec into different tech bounty hunter builds, and a rugged, atmospheric wasteland to explore, it looks like a sci-fi cowboy's dream. It's an ambitious project for an indie team, but the gameplay overviews have looked incredibly cohesive. If you love games that actually respect your moral choices, keep your eyes on this one. Team 17 and Expression Games are doing something wild. They are leaving the European theater behind and dropping us straight into the meat grinder of Southeast Asia with Hell Let Loose Vietnam. They just locked in a June 18th release date with an open beta kicking off on Steam at the end of May, and honestly, the scale here is exactly what you want from this franchise. We are talking massive 50 versus 50 tactical warfare across 6 giant launch maps, including iconic spots like the Tan Han Ho Bridge. But what makes this transition so interesting is how the change in era completely overhauls the gameplay. You aren't just running through open fields anymore. You're navigating dense, claustrophobic jungle canopy, dodging punji traps, and fighting through complex river networks using heavily armed patrol boats. The US side gets massive aerial dominance with helicopters, while the NVA forces rely on asymmetric warfare, tunnels, and map knowledge to completely ambush overconfident squads. It is built on Unreal Engine 5, so the visual grit, the mud, and the lighting look phenomenal. But let's talk about the reality here. The community is a little divided right now. Early footage has sparked some serious debates on Reddit and Discord about gunplay pacing, animation polish, and whether the extreme jungle foliage is going to turn visual clarity into a total nightmare. Hell Let Loose has always succeeded because it demands communication over individual heroics. If the devs can iron out those beta kinks and get the performance right, this could easily be the definitive Vietnam shooter we've been begging for since the Bad Company 2 days. Now, we all know the extraction shooter genre is getting incredibly crowded, but Hunger is throwing a massive, terrifying wrench into the formula. Developed by Good Fun Corporation, a studio founded by the creators of the incredibly successful tactical World War II shooter Hell Let Loose. This is a PvPvE horror extraction slasher set in a grim, alternate history Napoleonic Europe. The world has been absolutely devastated by a horrific plague called the bacterium. You play as a survivor, or a living who has to venture out from a safe haven sanctuary known as the Chateau into the muddy, terrifying wilderness to scavenge for resources, complete grim quests, and fight off both monstrous horrors and other players. The real standout mechanic here is the combat pacing. Because it's the 1800s, you aren't running around with full auto rifles. Firearm combat is methodical, loud, and reloading takes an agonizingly long time. So when your black powder pistol runs dry and the gap is closing fast, you have to dynamically pull out an axe, a sword, or a mace and enter a brutal physics-heavy melee dance. They are also leaning heavily into deep RPG mechanics. Unlike other extraction shooters where losing your loot means starting over completely, Hunger features permanent character skill progression, massive mastery trees with over 100 talents, and a fully player-driven marketplace inside the hub world. It looks incredibly dark, deeply atmosphere-focused, and it might just be the exact shakeup the extraction genre desperately needs. The absolute grandfather of the modern console shooter and the newly rebranded Halo Studios are doing something completely unprecedented. They announced Halo Campaign Evolved, a massive ground-up remake of the original Halo Combat Evolved campaign built entirely in Unreal Engine 5. And yes, you heard that right, it's breaking a 25-year tradition and launching on PlayStation 5 alongside Xbox and PC. Now, if you're thinking this is just Combat Evolved Anniversary with a prettier coat of paint, think again. The devs are radically changing the recipe here. They are adding features from later games like default sprinting and vehicle hijacking, meaning Master Chief can finally yank a Covenant Elite right out of a Wraith tank on the Alpha Ring. More importantly, they're adding 3 brand new prequel missions where you get to fight alongside Sergeant Avery Johnson before the main story even kicks off. But what makes this the definitive nostalgia trip is the co-op. They are throwing out the old 2-player limits and introducing full 4-player online co-op with cross-play and cross-progression across all platforms. They've even added 9 extra weapons from later games into the sandbox, including the battle rifle and needle rifle. The catch? There is zero competitive multiplayer here. Halo Studios is focusing 100% on the single-player and co-op narrative. Longtime fans are already arguing online about whether adding sprint and vehicle boarding ruins the tight, mathematical purity of Bungie's original 2001 level design, but looking at that stunning, hyper-realistic physics and lighting in Unreal 5, it's hard not to get excited about stepping foot on the ring world all over again.
However, there's no honor among scavengers, so don't be surprised if someone attacks even
Let's talk
after
about a
you fight.
game that wins the award for the most bizarrely unique premise of the year. Published by TinyBuild, Sand Raiders of Sophie is a PvPvE extraction shooter set in an alternate history 1910, where humanity conquered space under the banner of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Yeah, you heard that right? Spacefaring cosmic Austria-Hungary. The lore is wild. The Empire colonized a resource-rich planet named Sophie, using poor Galician laborers to build grand, luxurious cities. But an ecological disaster struck, causing the oceans to evaporate and leaving behind a massive, deadly desert planet covered in ruins, undead monsters called Upiors, and abandoned riches. Now, desperate raiders are heading down from orbital stations to claim what's theirs. The absolute core of this game is your Trampler. These are gigantic modular walking mech fortresses that act as your base, your loot storage, and your mobile battleship. Before you deploy, you use a deep editor to build your Trampler from scratch. You can make a fast, stealthy scout walker, a heavily armored tank bristling with mounted turrets, or a massive fortress to house your entire squad. Once you drop onto the dunes, it is pure high-stakes extraction chaos. You steer your massive war machine across procedurally generated deserts, park outside ruined cities, hop off to scavenge for priceless historical artifacts, and try to extract before rival players or a massive sandstorm wipes you out. It is a brilliant blend of Sea of Thieves crew mechanics and modern extraction tension, wrapped in a gorgeous retro-futuristic aesthetic.
This story is full of mysteries, like the zone itself.
Next up, GSC Game World just dropped a massive bombshell for anyone currently surviving the zone. They've announced the first major story expansion for S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, titled Cost of Hope, and it's slated to arrive this summer. Now, if you thought the base game was a punishingly beautiful experience, this expansion is aiming to double down on everything that makes this franchise a cult classic. The narrative hook here is fantastic. It focuses heavily on the legendary, deep-seated hatred between two of the zone's biggest factions, Duty and Freedom. Before the events of Heart of Chornobyl, all the groups had signed a fragile truce called the D4 Treaty. Well, in Cost of Hope, that peace is completely shattered, and you're dropped right into a tangled web of political intrigue, betrayal, and half-truths where there is absolutely no clean or morally right choice, but the absolute biggest selling point for longtime fans. The map is expanding. You are finally getting access to two heavily requested forbidden regions that have been locked off for years, the maze-like Iron Forest and the actual Chornobyl nuclear power plant itself. The devs are promising dozens of hours of non-linear gameplay, packed with brand new mutated nightmares, lethal anomalies, and top-tier gear like the Monolith SMG and the Rhino Revolver. GSC is treating this as the middle chapter of a new second trilogy of Stalker stories. If you love the oppressive, unforgiving atmosphere of the base game, Cost of Hope looks like an absolute must-play expansion that will show us exactly what people are willing to sacrifice to survive the zone. If you've been keeping an eye on the survival horror space, you already know that S.T.A.L.K.E.R has been one of the most mesmerizing, terrifying projects floating around the internet, developed by the folks at Mundfish, the team that gave us Atomic Heart. This is a first-person horror game that is aiming to push body horror and hyper-realism into absolute overdrive. Now look at this footage, the team building. This includes literal film industry horror veterans who worked on heavy-hitting cinematic projects like Longlegs and Until Dawn. And it shows. The game drops you into a massive, isolated research fort overrun by a mysterious force, and these absolutely horrific monstrosities called aberrations. But S.T.A.L.K.E.R isn't just relying on cheap jump scares, it is leaning entirely into what they call grotesque realism. The headline mechanic here is a visceral, localized dismemberment system that responds accurately to every bullet or strike. When you shoot an aberration, its flesh shreds, bones expose, and the creature's behavior actually changes based on the damage. They've also built an incredibly tactile melee system where you can't just rely on finding pristine weapons neatly resting on tables. You frequently have to physically wrench pipes and debris right out of the geometry of the walls to survive. The question mark with S.T.A.L.K.E.R has always been whether it can maintain this jaw-dropping cinematic fidelity in active real-time gameplay. The developers are keeping the entire experience firmly in first person with zero cuts between cutscenes and action. If they can successfully execute this level of relentless, uncompromised body horror, S.T.A.L.K.E.R won't just be scary, it might actually set a brand new benchmark for visual dread. Next up, Mundfish is taking us back to Facility 3826. Following the massive success of the original game, which managed to cross over 10 million players worldwide, the studio officially dropped the announcement trailer for Atomic Heart 2. And the big takeaway from their reveal is that they are leaning heavily into making this sequel a massive open-world genre mashup. The premise picks up right where the chaos left off. What was supposed to be a flawless, high-tech communist utopia powered by loyal AI and polymer robotics has completely spiraled into global collapse. The truth behind the neural network runs way deeper than anyone realized, and it's up to a fresh cast of characters to step into the ruins and stop total annihilation. Mundfish is promising that Atomic Heart 2 is going to be significantly bigger and bolder, with a major emphasis on deeper RPG mechanics and player freedom. You can expect wild new locations, a totally overhauled arsenal, and crazy physics-bending elemental abilities to slot into your power glove. At the same time, they also announced The Cube, a standalone multiplayer RPG shooter set in the same universe. Mundfish is clearly trying to build a massive Atomic Universe franchise. The first game definitely divided critics with its clunky open-world pacing and polarizing protagonist dialogue, but if Mundfish can take that feedback, polish up the combat flow, and deliver on the promise of actual player choice, Atomic Heart 2 could be an absolute juggernaut when it drops. Finally, let's talk about the return of one of the most atmospheric post-apocalyptic franchises in gaming history. 4A Games and Deep Silver have officially pulled back the curtain on Metro 2039, the highly anticipated fourth mainline entry in the series, and it is shaping up to be the darkest, most brutal chapter yet. The story takes place 3 years after the events of Metro Exodus. For the first time in a mainline game, we aren't playing as RDO. Instead, we are stepping into the boots of the Stranger, a deeply traumatized, fully voiced recluse plagued by violent nightmares. He is forced out of exile and dragged back down into the absolute worst place imaginable, the Moscow Metro. But things have changed down there. The underground factions have finally united under a single terrifying fascist banner called the Novorake, led by none other than the fanatical Spartan Hunter. The development of this game was heavily impacted by the real-world invasion of Ukraine, and 4A Games has been incredibly open about how that trauma fundamentally altered the narrative. They've completely ditched the wide-open sandboxes of Exodus to return to the tight, terrifying, claustrophobic tunnels of the Metro system, focusing heavily on raw environmental storytelling and the horrors of tyranny. Built on an advanced iteration of their custom 4A engine, they are pushing real-time ray tracing to its absolute limits to create unmatched atmospheric dread, between a gun maintenance mechanic that can cause your weapon to misfire mid-fight and a world flooded with propaganda and fear. Metro 2039 is trying to deliver a hauntingly realistic survival thriller. It is a massive tonal shift, and it looks absolutely incredible. If you enjoyed this video, do us a huge favor and hit that like button. It seriously helps the channel out more than you know. And if you're new here, consider hitting subscribe and clicking that little bell icon so you never miss any video.